Good morning, Mr. Anthony. How you doing today?
I'm doing all right,
Okay, it's been a while since we did this. You know, the last time you had touched on a whole lot of interesting points, and I know you still have so much to share. So, let's not pretend this is new. Let's just start it, just kick this off. What brings you back to the listening ear public?
Well, it's a couple things that bring me back to this public is the fact that, like I say, the title by Carter G. Woodson, The Miseducation of the Negro, is a profound statement to me. And with all of the miseducation with media and what you see social networks saying they're about to censor certain commentary and allow other commentary out, which is going to be harmful to us, I think it's imperative that we go back to the basis of our own research and study, right? Ourselves. So I want to profound on subjects from the basis of it, such as like immigration, put it in full context, and also I want to examine and show how I specifically learn and educate myself about these subjects, because I had to do it outside of traditional education because they looked at my learning technique as a disability when it was a learning differences, which is dyslexia, right? So, being that, I wanted to, explain to us, how immigration has been used as a weapon against us as a people from its inception, right? And continue to be used as a means to undermine our political power and our economic progress.
Okay,
Right.
well, that sounds like a very good starting point. So, on that note, Mr. Anthony, why don't you let the listening public know and understand what it is that you learned that is vital to the re-education from the miseducation process?
Well, what I learned is, when we look at the integration from its inception, and I look at the peak of integration, it was 1870, which is 5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, 13th Amendment was signed. So 5 years after we was released from slavery, they did what was called, they went to England, Europe, and said, send us your poor, send us your sick, and bring in European immigrants. So, and at that time, they didn't care about the condition of those immigrants, so you have to ask yourself, why would they do that? And then you look at the setting and the conditions of that time. They also established the Department of Justice in 1870.
Wow.
10% of the immigrants was Irish, who notoriously was originally the police in our communities.
Wow, the original slave patrol members.
So you can see how they was brought here in order to police us and to undermine our economic power, right? And our
Right.
political power, being that we had once received our freedom, right?
Right.
And I say why they had a precursor of who will we become is because of what is Central Park today. That was
Wow.
Seneca Village and another black community. And you know this because 70% of it was black home ownership because in 1855, we know this because you had to own your house for 3 years in order to vote.
Wow. That's something that a lot of people didn't know.
So in order to take away their political power, what they did was the majority white group created eminent domain politically and took their properties,
Wow.
created Central Park. So this says this is the motivation for the mass recruitment of Europeans and giving them the citizenship ahead of us is to create this European white political base, power base, to undercut us prior to us receiving our citizenship.
Wow.
You
That
know?
is a lot to take in.
So we got to understand that they are the original people who was used immigration in order to undermine our political and economic capital.
So the immigration issue that is plastered all over the news, and that they're using the Latino community as the catalyst for that now. A lot of people, including me, members of the Latino community, and people at large, don't realize that this started long before they used people of the Latino communities, both in past and present. That the immigration policy started long before they used other people of color to pit them against us, the original targets of discriminatory practices by the government.
They repeated the process when we won the civil rights process, and so they had to open up immigration again because you had to give minorities such and such rights. So to make that inclusive, this is where they opened up to the Indians, the Asians, and people of that nature. This is why you see them dominate small business in our community. They was recruited in here, given the loans and access to the capital in order to help economically oppress us. Them failing to recognize that, right? Leaves them to the vulnerable condition that they are in today while they're being attacked.
Okay.
You see?
I see.
And that's what all of us not understanding these aspects of it is that all of it has been a method to undermine us, because if you look at the voting process and the rights that have been established in America, actually Black Americans have been the political or the conscious pulse of America.
Right.
13th Amendment, 14th Amendment, equal
Right.
protection to the law, all these things to open up the Constitution to everybody was things that was fought for by Black Americans.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So they recruited the whites in here in order to undermine our political capital, and they're continuously voting in that favor to this day.
Right, because it started so long ago, but a lot of people have been lost on that part of history because, as we all know, they're taking a lot of these things out of the educational curricula. They're using the dog whistle terms like CRT, DEI, and so forth to get people to not focus on the underlying issue and purposes for why they continue to push these narratives and continue to keep people confused and confounded and fighting amongst one
another.
another.
And then we got to realize they have a certain motivation because they came over here during the Victorian era.
Right.
See, so they came over here during extreme poverty in Europe.
Do explain that to the listeners.
So in the Victorian area, what it was is they was living in workhouses. They didn't have rights to land or anything like that in England. They couldn't own properties or any other thing.
So if I may interrupt and interject a point that I believe you're making, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the very conditions that they forced upon the slaves is the very conditions that themselves were suffering under from where they were before they came over here.
Correct. This is why I tell people
Wow.
you have to understand that the first time that they was free was when you was enslaved.
Wow.
This is why they hold on to that so hard.
And that makes sense.
So when they was recruited to come over here, you have to understand that we was going through the Reconstruction period. We had thriving Black communities, Pine Bluff, Arkansas, Wilmington, North Carolina, thriving. You do any research, thriving Black communities. So they came over here in extreme poverty. They was considered white tribes by the majority of America.
They're on other
white people.
Other white people, basically.
You see?
Right.
So they came over here, and then the recruitment process of them bringing them from Europe didn't end until 1913. What happened in 1913? World War I started.
Right.
That's the only thing that slowed them up from recruiting these white people over here. Right?
Right.
So you have to understand that we was building massive amount of wealth, and they come over here. See, us building wealth, they come from living during the Victoria era where they was living in workhouses. Their children was forced to work in factories.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So this is the conditions that they come from to come and see these people, because during slavery, we had so many skills even in slavery. Places like Wilmington, North Carolina had to have coordinates to ban slave hiring. Slaves walked around with numbers on their necks identifying their trade. We had skills.
Wow.
So we left slavery with these trades, these skills. But we came into slavery with it. I ain't gonna go into that. But
Right.
we left with these skills still they did not have, because you have to understand that who's going to pay this white person to do anything when you have slaves?
Especially when you have skilled slaves and artisans and blacksmiths and so forth, and they've already have proven their worth and their skill to do a better job, but they was forced to do it for free.
And their value came in, the yeoman's, poor whites' value came in their ability to keep you in line for the wealthy. This is why they consistently vote in favor of the wealthy to oppress you, even themselves.
Right.
You see?
Right.
So we have to understand that 1,400 white families owned land throughout the South throughout slavery. In Wilmington, North Carolina, in 1898, over 1,000 black families owned land only 30 years out of slavery.
Wow. And a lot of people don't know that.
See, so when they say that, and understand that at the same time, we done already lost $74 million taken from us to start the railroads. But we have no railroads.
Right.
That's what they took the Freeman money from.
Wow.
We have no railroads. Even though the brother invented the third railroad with the electricity, we have no electricity. We have no Pacific company. You see what I'm saying?
The inventions they weren't allowed to claim,
Right.
Because the government offices of copyright and patent registration, they couldn't do so because they weren't considered citizens. So the person who was able to take control of the copyright and or patent or trademark was the owner,
And
or white.
Not to only understand this, before we was given our citizenship, they recruited them from Europe as with intents to be citizens, and then they passed the Homestead Act and gave people with intent to be citizens, right?
Right.
They allowed them to capture land.
Yes.
So 1866, right after our emancipation, they passed what is called vagrant laws. After you then gave the land away to whites, forcing us to go back to be what you call sharecroppers, right?
Right.
To work that land. Understand, we have to first understand that each state sent a letter of concession to the Union. Each of those southern states' justification for leaving the Union was for their fight for their rights to own black people to do the labor that they said that they could not do.
Right.
They actually said it.
Yes, they did. It's in their own constitution. They actually redrafted a whole new constitution, and they took out key words and included other key words, and they were specific and explicit about why they were succeeding and why they felt the need to succeed. To contrary to what people would like to believe, saying that that is not the reason, even though they said it out of their own mouth and they documented what they meant, what they said out of their own
specifically
mouth.
said that no one else could work this land but the Negro. So I need us to understand that the Civil War was a transfer of us from private ownership to public ownership. This is where you get the prison leasing. This is where you get the recruitment of the Irishmen over here to police us.
Using slave patrols
Right.
to also track down the slaves. That
See, when Irish said they was treated like us, that's not true. The reason they was treated different than us, it was religious war.
Okay.
It's completely different. We initially was treated and done due to religious purposes, but that's going back to them issuing the Pope's bull on the black Muslims and Jews in Spain. So that was the original justification for our enslavement. That was issued in 1455.
Wow.
That's when England was part of the Roman Catholic. Well, England was with the Roman Catholic Church. But what ended up happening is when England splintered from the Roman Catholic Church, the Irish stayed with the Roman Catholic Church, but they was supposed to be under the English monarchy.
Gotcha.
Right? And so when they broke off, the way it goes is whoever is the head of the Church of England is the king.
Right.
Because they was ordained and governed to rule initially by the Pope.
So it's all interrelated.
All interrelated. So that's why they was treated different. So they come here and try to make it like it was, we was treated bad, it ain't a race issue. No. That was a power issue because they used religion as a means for power. This is why they was opposed to having a Catholic president, because they didn't want to be ruled by the Pope.
Got it.
That's totally different.
Right.
But they English using their oppression on the Irish, right? When you oppress a person, that's why you read 40 Laws of Power, and it says, if you don't have enemies, make enemies. And they would prove themselves harder, right, to prove your loyalty more than a friend or foe, or than a friend who feels like they have a certain amount of trust and can get away with other things.
Gotcha.
So that's the process of bringing the Irish over here.
And that's still the foundational relationship of the whole immigration
process. Still that process.
It's still all related.
It's still all that process. So I just want us to understand from that point and up to the only reason why they stopped recruiting them in is the war.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? 1913 they kicked off World War. They kicked off World War One.
Right.
So that's and another thing that happened in 1913. I'm gonna end off with that for right now is that they created the Federal Reserve.
Yes, I'm familiar with that, but most of your viewers are not. And I know that's a subject that's one of your passions because it deals with finances, business finances, and economics. And on that note, I look ardently forward to continue this discussion, starting with that, because I know that's one of your passions. We spoke a lot about that before when we did the interviews, and the knowledge is profound. You expanded my head, and you encouraged me to go back and do more research than I had already done. And I'm certain if you did it for me, I'm more than positive you did it for a lot of the viewers that listen to your content and appreciate the time and the effort and patience that you use to provide this content, to make sure you get it out there. And as you said, education is the key. So you're a shining example of why education is important. So you can't be easily misled and continue to be hoodwinked into believing anything that's been said to you.
I want us to understand this. Education is options.
Yes.
The more informed you are, the more options you have.
I totally agree.
The more abilities you have to address issues that's confronted with you, the more you have the ability to hurdle obstacles in front of you. That all comes with information, knowledge. But I want to just say, how I learned, and I know I mixed a lot of different things in together is because I'm dyslexic, and being dyslexic, I don't learn in a certain linear way. I have to see things in perspective. And I'm going to say this because if you're dyslexic, then you understand the issue with dyslexic is that you see words in reverse, numbers in reverse, and how they're able to identify you as being dyslexic is because your comprehension. The reason why you have that comprehension, even without knowing, you read the whole subject, the whole title, or the whole sentence in order to get the full picture of that word that you misconstrued.
Right.
So knowing this factor, when I go into a subject, how I go into looking at it, I try to see the whole broader perspective. So
Right.
when I study a subject, I try to put it in context of the environment and how it trickles down to current day, so that we can become proactive instead of reactive, right?
Right.
That is why politics have not been beneficial to us as a people. It's because we lack having our own agenda and our own clarification of our own condition.
Wow. That's profound, but it's so accurate. It is so accurate. On that note, Mr. Ampley, I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me, and I appreciate you allowing me to interview you and start interviewing you again. And I look forward to next week's session.